Now, here's the crazy stat. 50% of people that have their promotions tab activated check it daily. What we've seen is when you go in the promotions tab, it does not depress the performance of whatever it is that you're sending out. And here's why. When you go to the mall, you're in buying mode. When someone goes to their promotions tab, they're not lost. They've intentionally gone there looking for offers, promotions, solicitations, things. And that's why we don't see that people that go into the promotions tab, their performance doesn't go down at all. So spending your energy and time trying to get out of the promotions tab, I think is an epic waste because it's not that many people and it doesn't hurt performance.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Evergreen Marketing Podcast by Kara.com. I'm your host, Brady Winder, and this is a podcast where we help you build a business of freedom and impact by dialing in your online marketing. I've got today with me an expert email marketing guy and a copywriting master. Hopefully I didn't over-exaggerate there, Jay, but he's also the host of one of the top marketing podcasts in the US, the Do This, Not That podcast. This guy knows email marketing, knows email copy, and what my hope for this episode today is to have a conversation about how to get leads to actually respond to you with curiosity, how to get people to raise their hands. So if you guys are doing follow-up, if you're doing text, automated follow-up campaigns, text and email, I want to be able to speak to that, the psychology of what you need to say, but also some of the best tactics because things are changing. We've done other episodes on follow-up in the past where we mentioned scripts, but I want to dive into the psychology and best practices today. So you can hopefully by the end of this episode go into like Carrot CRM or InvestorFuse and put some of these automated campaigns into place. So I'll stop yapping. Jay, welcome to the podcast, man. It's good to have you.
Yeah, excited to be here. I love talking about all this stuff, and we're going to share some quick wins that actually I think will make an impact.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm excited to get into the weeds with you. Quick icebreaker. What's the weirdest thing to happen to you in the last week, or what's the weirdest conversation you've had?
Let's see. I really like reality TV. So I got asked on a podcast, the new season of The Bachelor is about to start. So people wanted me to do a deep dive on the history of The Bachelor, which is odd on a podcast, but I was excited to do it. And sadly, I knew a lot about it.
Yeah, you were like, this is my moment to shine. Yeah, this is my moment of glory.
That's right. I was ready for this. You never know what you're ready for, but I was ready for that.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, you guys run props to you. We're talking before we hit record. You guys run a really great podcast, 5 episodes a week. You're hitting it hard, but guys, they run a really cool podcast. They get into the weeds on some marketing, a lot of overlap with Evergreen Marketing Podcast, but go check it out.
Thank you.
Let's get into the weeds of this, man. So I'll kind of start at like the theoretical kind of heady level, and then we'll get into like subject lines, body copy, how are you using AI, how do you automate things like that. But kind of just brain dump on me, Jay. What are some of the best practices or like habits or psychological things you need to keep in mind when you're doing email marketing or text follow-up, things like that?
Well, since it's, a big real estate group here, I'm a big fan of looking at email like real estate. Your email list is probably the most important asset that you have other than your actual real estate that you own. And the reason I say that is when you put things out on social or search, whatever, you don't control that, right? You can't get it out to your entire audience. You can't do any of that. That is rented land. But your email database is your owned asset. It is your owned land. It is the only marketing channel for basically no money that you can communicate whatever it is that you want to communicate at any given moment. There's nothing else like that on the planet. And so prioritizing growing your email database should be at the core of your overall business, because you have so much that you want to get out there. And if you don't have any way to get it out to everybody, then you're relying on the algorithms and all the garbage that's out there. So that's why I get really hyped about email.
Yeah, exactly. You're not at the mercy of a sudden algorithm shift. You own that email list.
Always. Yeah.
And for a lot of you guys, like generating leads, like don't make the mistake of thinking like, oh, that lead wasn't a good fit or they were undecided. They're old leads. You can resurface those in the Carrot CRM. You should be always bringing up those old leads. You own that audience.
100%.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, how to kind of nurture a list, what to do with those leads. But okay, cool, man. Let's get into the weeds here. So How do you get people to raise their hand, or like, how do you kind of pique curiosity? Talk to me about like some of the best subject lines you've
Yeah.
seen and kind of what works.
Yeah. I'm glad you say that, because a lot of times when we're sending out an email, we think about, oh, what are we writing inside the email, or what's the offer, or what are we pushing? What's in our newsletter? And it's
Mhm.
backwards. If you don't get the email opened, who actually cares what's inside the email, right? So we got to get that email open. And the number one thing that's going to get that email opened is that subject line. And the interesting thing about your subject line is that nobody actually reads your whole subject line. They don't. You could write Jay's a big loser at the end of your subject line. Nobody's going to see it because nobody reads it, right? They look at the first few characters, the first few words, and that's when they determine, yeah, I'm into this thing. I'm going to check it out. When we look at our inboxes, we're doing a social scroll. We're moving really fast, and we're deciding really fast in this like millisecond, is there anything here that I want to open? So what you want to be thinking about, what can you do in the first few characters of your subject line that are going to grab that millisecond attention? And there are little things that have a massive impact. I'll give you some examples. If you start your subject line, literally the first character, with a number, right? Your open rate, the percentage of people opening up your email, will rise by about 20% than if you don't. Example, the 3 homes in your area that just went up for sale, right? The 7 things you need to know if you want to sell your home. The 5 most important things to know about the real estate market. Because when you see that number, it actually is something that stands out just a little bit, right? And it's also very definitive, it's authoritative. So starting your email subject line with a number is easy. That's a win. Another one that works really well now is starting your subject line with a fully capitalized word or phrase. So, for example, just in. If you capitalize all the letters, JUSTIN, just in, colon, and then you write your regular subject line, or new, colon, and all the letters are capitalized, again, it grabs that millisecond attention and it lifts your open rates by about 15% just by capitalizing that word. Some of the other little things that work that I don't think enough marketers and people that are marketing try are things like super short subject lines, 1 to 2 word subject lines. And it doesn't even half matter what the words say. The reason that works so well is when you're looking at your inbox, you see all these characters and letters and words. And then all of a sudden, if you have a 1 word or 2 word subject line, there's all this white space after
I
your
messed
1 to
up.
2 words.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute. Your eyes are drawn to it because it's unlike anything else that you are staring at on your phone or on your computer. And the name of the game is, what are you going to do when you hit send to get your email to stand out and not everybody else's? So these little things at the start of your subject line are a game changer.
That's good advice, man. Have you guys ever tested like no subject line?
Yeah, no subject line does well. It gets up a little bit flagged here and there as an issue. And speaking of getting flagged, I want to dispel a myth. People believe that there are things out there called spam trigger words. There are all these lists. You can go and Google, what are the spam trigger words? And people believe that if you put a certain word in your subject line, that's the reason that you go to the junk folder or the spam folder. People think that if you put the word free, for example, in the subject line, a free report about your area. That's not true. It's called content filtering, and that was the case 10 years ago. That's why you went to the junk folder or spam folder 10 years ago, because you used capitalization or a question mark or an emoji or brackets or words like free. That was the reason you got filtered. That is no longer the reason. You do not go to the junk folder or spam folder because of spam trigger words. I don't care if you read an article about it today that says spam trigger words are bad. They're not. It's misinformation that's getting regurgitated. That has nothing to do with the reason you're going to the junk folder or spam folder. So I want to liberate everybody to put in their subject line what they want to put in their subject line.
Okay, that's good stuff, man. I want to circle. Well, heck, I was going to say let's circle back around to it. I was going to ask it later, but let's just talk about it now, because this is something that I deal with as a marketer. Now I've got a bone to pick with Infusionsoft because of what you just said. It's like spam filter has been triggered. You mentioned $, or you mentioned you've exaggerated large amounts of money, but it's like, no, we have a case study I want to let people know about because it's helpful for them. What do you mean spam trigger? So how do they determine? How do you stay out of the spam folder and the promotion folder? Because that's huge.
So let's break that down a little bit. First off, it doesn't matter if you are Amazon, the NFL, Salesforce, doesn't matter who you are. Some percentage of your email will go to the junk folder. It will, right? On average, about 20% of all email from all senders goes to the junk folder. I say that because if you see an email go to the junk folder, it doesn't mean you're doing something horribly wrong. This is part of email. Okay. Now, what you want to be looking at is your metrics, right? You want to benchmark whatever it is that you are doing. Forget about industry benchmarks or any of this other nonsense. If you're sending out different kinds of emails, you have your email newsletter you send out, you have your email promotions you send out, you have transactional emails. You want to bucket the different types of emails that you send out and then benchmark that. What's your average open rate? What's your average click-through rate for your newsletter, for your sales emails? What is the benchmark? And then when you test things, like you put your $ in there, did putting that in there lift up your open rated click rate, or did it drop it down? And that's the metrics that matter. It's not anything else that your platform tells you or this tells you or that tells you what at all. Now, the
Just
other
your
thing that
own
you
metrics.
mentioned,
Yeah.
was that?
Just your own metrics. You're saying pay attention to how
You're like a swimmer or a weightlifter. You are trying to beat yourself every time.
Okay.
That has to be your mindset. How can I beat myself every time? And then the other thing that you mentioned, which I'm really glad you did, is the promotions tab. So many people think, how do I get out of the promotions tab? I'm going to tell you why you don't want to get out of the promotions tab. Number one, the promotions tab is actually part of your inbox. It's not the junk folder. It's actually part of your inbox. So if you're going in the promotions tab, believe it or not, you're in the inbox. Now, very few people actually have their promotions tab activated. It's less than 25% of Gmail users, which is the biggest users of the promotions tab. Now, here's the crazy stat. 50% of people that have their promotions tab activated, right? 50% of people check it daily. That's crazy. And what we've seen is when you go in the promotions tab, it does not depress the performance of whatever it is that you're sending out. And here's why. When you go to the mall, right, wherever you live, you're in buying mode. You're like, what am I buying today? I'm in the mall. When someone goes to their promotions tab, they're not lost. They're not like, where am I? What am I doing? They've intentionally gone there looking for offers, promotions, solicitations, things, right? So that's why if 50% of the people are going to their promotions tab daily, they're in this buying mode. They're in this research mode. And that's why we don't see that people that go into the promotions tab, their performance doesn't go down at all. So spending your energy and time trying to get out of the promotions tab, I think, is an epic waste because it's not that many people and it doesn't hurt performance. Now, you don't want to have poor deliverability. I strongly recommend that you take your database at least once a year and you go put it through a validation service, an email validation service, to remove spam traps and complainers and all this stuff. And we can go down that rabbit hole, but I wouldn't worry about the promotions tab.
Interesting. You're already dispelling quite a few myths that people would be thinking about wasting. You just spinning their wheels on.
Right. Totally. And that's the problem. We have so much time in the day and everyone's doing their regular jobs and like, oh, I got to get to my email marketing. And then you're going down these rabbit holes of like, oh my God, I'm in the promotion tab, or I'm going to the junk folder, or I'm getting a spam trigger word. And it's like, no, just don't listen to that garbage. Just keep on going.
Interesting, man. Okay. So we talked about subject lines. Let's talk about body text. I'm curious, and I know we're talking in general terms here, but for the average real estate investor, it's going to be shorter, shorter, maybe more conversational email to get someone to raise their hand. But some of our audience, like we're talking about, maybe they have a newsletter they send out, like a market update, or they're nurturing their list, sending out an email every month or a few months. Is there any general rule of thumb on like how long an email should be? Does it matter?
It all matters. And I think the first thing I would tell you is you're probably not even sending out enough email. And that's where I would start before we even say what should be in the email. And I think in the real estate market, I see this a lot. People will get focused on their email sending for like a month or two. Like, oh yeah, we're getting our newsletter, we're getting our promotional stuff. And then they move on to something else and they won't send again for another 2 or 3 weeks or a month. They won't get to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing you can do to stay in a person's inbox, to make sure that you are getting that business, is to be sending enough. You need to at least be sending email weekly, at least. And here's why, for 2 reasons. One is the way that you don't go in the junk folder or the spam folder is based on engagement, technical engagement. How often are people opening and clicking on the emails that you're sending? Okay, if you don't send enough email, and we see it in all the data, if you don't send at least a weekly email to your database, you actually cannot generate enough opens and clicks to then stay in that person's inbox. From a technical perspective, you can't. You need that engagement. So you need to be sending more. It needs to be relevant stuff. You can't just send out garbage. obviously, but sending out more is step number one. Now, when you're deciding, okay, well, what should I send out? What should be inside? All this different type of stuff. There's two different populations of people in your database. There's people that care about you and people that barely care about you, right? The people that care about you, maybe you have a segment of your database that you've done transactions with, that you've engaged with, that you know really well, and they're over here. You can take those people and be more verbose. They sort of care about what you have to say. But all the other people, the majority of your database, right? These people don't care. They barely opened up the message, barely. And if they open up that message and it is visually boring, forget about any words in there. If it's visually boring, forget it, they're done. What do I mean by visually boring? You never want to have any block of text that's more than 4 lines, ever. Because when you see a big block of text, it's 5 or 6 lines long, it doesn't matter if it says you won the lottery. Nobody's reading it, because it's like when you get a text from a friend and it's like a big text. You're like, whoa, I'm going to get to that later. This is drama.
Mark is unread. Yeah.
Right. It's like, that is a later problem. I forget it. Right. But when it's an email, you just move on. You delete it. You're like, who cares? I'm not reading it. So not being visually boring is really, really important. And then right in that first few words, you got to hit them in the face with something crazy like, what? I need to read the rest of it, where it's like, this home just sold for 50% above, comps on your street, or 72% of people just did this in your area. Like, oh, there's one statement that's bananas, right? And then that's the hook to get them to keep on going. You can't save that hook for the bottom, because if you don't get them, email is like a chain of events. They need to see that subject line. Oh, that's cool. I'm opening it. They see your headline. Oh, that's cool. I want to keep reading. They read that first line. Oh, that's cool. Anywhere in there that chain gets broken by boredom, they're done. Goodbye. It's over. And then the other thing I would think about in there is having a PS. PS is so valuable, and restating your offer in the PS with a link. We don't actually read emails. We'll open it up. We'll say, hi, Jay, whatever. We'll probably read the first line, making sure there's space around that first line. Then we're going to go right down to the bottom, and we're going to look for that PS. When you have a PS with a call to action, a link in the PS, your click-through rates go up on average by about 15%, because that's how we scan email. So little things like that really, really matter. And then the other piece I would think about is everything in your email. When you hit send on an email, you generally have a goal, right? You have a goal, right? You're like, I hope when I send this email out that this happens, that people inquire about this house, or they do this thing, or they do that, or whatever. And the reason I say that is, on average, about 20% of all clicks on any email that is sent out is on the logo in the message. Could be a letter format email, could be a graphical email, doesn't matter.
That is high. Interesting.
That's really high. And the problem is, we don't think about that traffic. We don't think about every conduit to response. Where do you want the traffic to go? Do you want it to go just to your generic homepage? Do you want it to go to some other page with a special offer? Where do you want it to go? You need to think about every link in every message that you send out.
Are you saying, I want to get into the weeds for a sec. Would you change the logo link to your CTA? So if you have like a special offer or something, would you do that? Or is that like... I
do. I know sometimes it's hard for people that are automating their emails, but I do, right? So our logo will go to whatever the offer is that we are promoting in that particular moment, because I'm a little bit extreme. I believe, for example, I don't want any social sharing links. If we're sending out an email that's promoting an offer of some kind, you will never see any social sharing links. You won't see anything going anywhere but to that offer page, because we're only pressing send because I want that offer taken advantage of. And a click that goes anywhere else is meaningless to me. That's extreme, right? But on the flip side of that, what we see is, here's people include the navigation bar to their website and 17 other things, and forget it. They're gone. Like, what do you want them to do? Figure out what you're doing? You can't figure out what you're doing. How are they going to figure out what you're doing?
Right. That's good, because I think of like our average member, the real estate investor doing follow up. They've got a lead, whether this is text or email follow up. Let's say you send them an email, and it's like, hey, it was a pleasure chatting with you, or was just hoping to get in touch with you. Just want to let you know, I just did a recent deal with so-and-so in this neighborhood. We were able to flip this house, beautify the neighborhood. here's a link to the case study, unless in case you want to see the work that we did. This is kind of how we work with sellers. I
Yeah.
don't know,
Yeah,
just one little
exactly.
example, but just that link driving to the case study, not all the other social, like, oh, by the way, check out our newsletter, our podcast, yada, yada. And then within that blog or that case study on the website, it's like, boom, drive them to the form,
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Get an offer.
Yeah, and especially if that's your goal. Yeah, if you want to get more social followers, great, you do that. You want to watch a YouTube video, great, do that on a different thing. But if your goal is, listen, I need this case study downloaded so I have hand raisers so I can call these people, drive everyone to that goal.
Yeah. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that you need to show them every platform you exist on or all the different things you have.
Yeah, and this is the problem with, anything in general. Like you'll go and you'll someone down like an email template from some tool or something or whatever. And the templates check every box. Here's where your social sharing links go, and here's where this goes. Well, that's great. That's called wallpaper. That's what everybody does, right? You're trying to actually get some business done. And so you can't follow the same playbook because that's where, response goes to die.
Interesting. Yeah, you blend in with everyone else.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good, man. So for let's talk about like a follow-up sequence for a real estate investor or an agent. I'm curious, like I see conversational emails working best for our members. Like, hey, just want to check in, emails like that. How do you automate and stay conversational?
Well, one of the coolest tactics that has grown a lot in the last year or two is instead of sending out emails that say, hey, click here to get our guide or area report or download whatever, right? Instead of doing that, it's moved to, hey, we just did a big analysis in your area. I would love to send you a guide just about your home. Reply to this email and write the word home in the email that you send us, right? And you're replying it and you're writing the word home, or reply and say my house or guide or whatever. And a lot of the platforms now allow for this all to be automated where, okay, the person takes the action, they get that email, and there's nothing for them to click through on. The only way they can get the asset, the content, the thing, is if they reply to the email and they put in that one word. Okay. Now, the beautiful part is when they do that, you can automate that. So that way, another email then goes back to them with, okay, here's the guide, whatever, and I would love to talk to you, blah, 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 whatever. Or you don't even have to automate it. You could do one offs, send everything back and be like, here's the guide, and I know your house really well. We should talk or whatever. But automating and having people take advantage of your offer by having them actually reply as opposed to them clicking through has probably been one of the biggest growth tactics in email, because the secret behind it is if you get somebody to reply to your email, you stay in their inbox forever. That's it. Game over. You've won. And so it's a great way to automate your emails and get a lot of leads.
Yeah, interesting. That's really good, man. Might have to try something like that out.
Yeah.
How are you? This is a broad question. How are you using AI? Or maybe what are some of the favorite ways you're using AI for email and text marketing?
Yeah, I think a lot of people go to AI and say, write this for me, write that for me. And that's great. You should do that, whatever. But a couple of underrated, super easy ways you do all the free versions. So you want to go ChatGPT, use the free version or Gemini or whatever you use. Okay. And you can do a few things. Number one, take whatever email that you sent out. Okay, upload it. There's a little upload button. There's a paperclip button on the prompt bar. You can upload any image you want. You upload that, and you say, ChatGPT, I want you to be the world's greatest email consultant. I want you to analyze this email and tell me what are the call to action you would change? What's the subject line you would change? What's the body copy? This is the audience I'm going after, and I want you to shred my email. It will blow your mind in terms of the tactics it gives you back. And you could do that, image upload on all of these tools. They all have it. It's free. I don't think people do it enough. Another one that I love doing,
You're
which is
just screenshot the email and upload it? Yeah.
Just screenshot it and upload it as an image, and that's it. Something that I do a lot, which is totally ridiculous, going to sound silly, is I sign up for all of my competitors' emails, every single one, their newsletters, everything. And I have them all go into a folder in one of my inboxes, okay? And then I go to that folder and I shrink the screen size on my computer to make it so small I can't even read all the different subject lines that are showing up in that folder of mine in my inbox. I make a screenshot, make an image, literally a screenshot of that folder with all these subject lines of all my competitors' emails. I upload that screenshot to ChatGPT and say, hey, these are all emails, in the real estate sector about house flipping, all my competitors. I want you to tell me which of the 5 subject lines here that have the most likelihood of getting opened and which ones are going to have the least likelihood of getting opened and why, using all of your data. And it will instantly tell you what are the tactics that your competitors are doing that they think is working and which are the ones that stink. And in 3 seconds, you're going to get all these test ideas that you probably never considered before. So if you haven't messed around with uploading screenshots to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever you use, it's super easy. It couldn't be faster, and I think it's underutilized.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I was thinking about like copy and pasting the text, but I sometimes I just forget. Like, oh, you could
Yeah.
screenshot it, and then because then it has that visual element too.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, maybe move this image down,
totally.
whatever.
Yeah.
Interesting. Um, quick other question, just to get even more into the weeds. Does this file size, image size matter and things like that? Like
Yeah, it does. I mean, not as much
too
as
big
it
of
used
attachments?
to, right? You can't,
Yeah.
you can't do attachments. Then you're really kind of screwed,
Or
right?
sorry, not attachments. I meant to say like
Yeah.
images in the actual email,
Yeah, for sure. Images and emails do great. And it's unlikely that you're going to do so many images that you're going to get clipped or run into a problem because you'll see a lot of emails that just have a ton of images. So
Uh-huh.
rarely will you run into a file size thing. As a matter of fact, I think an underutilized tactic is animated GIFs. That's not putting a video in email, but you can put an animated GIF of anything in an email, and it does really, really well because anything that make it stand out a little bit, move around a little bit, is going to grab that attention a little bit. So if you think that things like animated GIFs are silly or emojis in the subject line are silly or anything like that, you're wrong. I mean, that is how we communicate. That's what we get excited about. Memes do incredibly well in email newsletters, for example, because this is like our love language. This is how we communicate with each other.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I hadn't thought about using GIFs in it. It's like, yeah, I think as marketers, sometimes we get caught up in like, oh, is this not on brand? Is this like too
Right.
professional or is it the opposite? Whatever. But it's like, no, how do we as human beings communicate? Yeah.
100%. I mean, look at all the biggest players out there in tech. I mean, let's look at Mark Zuckerberg. We put aside whatever he's out there saying about Meta and all this stuff, but look about his own brand in the last 24 months. 24 months ago, he was the nerdiest guy in the world, just a big fat nerd, right? And now he grew his hair out, he wears chains, he's Mr. Cool, he does jujitsu. And why did he do that? Because you need to insert humanity into our marketing now because everything's becoming so generic with AI and all this stuff out there. It's the same thing with any of our marketing. That's why emojis work in a subject line. That's why memes work in really even high-end real estate transaction emails. This humanity needs to be inserted in order to actually show that you are a functional human being.
Interesting, man. What are some of the like the most human or most creative emails that have worked well for you? I don't even care about like industry applicable to real estate or not, but like some of the emails or creative things you've done that you're most proud of.
That's an interesting question. I'm shocked. I have my own newsletter that I send out, and what's funny about it is it's about marketing, and I share all these tips and tactics and stuff. And then at the bottom, I have this section called "Since You Didn't Ask," and in that section, I write about horrible dinners I've gone out with, recently, TV shows I've watched, anything going on in pop culture that I think is ridiculous. And every time I hit send, I get like probably 100x feedback on the since you didn't ask portion as compared to the actual marketing tips and tactics that I work so hard with my team to come up with on. And it just anytime anybody, you'll be at a webinar and then the speaker will just go off the cuff on a little bit like, hey, I just finished watching Shogun. What did anybody else see that? And you're like, oh my God, he said something that's not boring, you know? And it's just this constant shock to me that all we want to do is not be torturously bored with the regular talk that we all do.
Interesting. That's kind of funny. I can relate to that. We have a newsletter on and off here at Carrot, but one of the emails I sent a while back that got like a bunch of responses was I just had a photo of like downtown or town where Carrot headquarters is, like downtown Roseburg. It was middle of fall, so it was like orange, yellow, and it's just beautiful. And I was like, man, this cell phone photo, for some reason, I just want to share with people. I actually threw it in the top of the email. I was like, hey, look at this photo I just took of like, this is right outside Carrot headquarters. Isn't it beautiful? And then just had nothing to do with anything. And then the rest of the email and the replies I get from them, like, oh, that's interesting. People are responding here.
That's what they want.
It's different. Huh.
Yeah,
that's funny, man.
Totally.
Tell me about, okay, so let's talk about like the average investor who has a bunch of leads that maybe they're not doing anything with in their database, and they want to start a newsletter or they want to do like a follow-up campaign with some of those old leads. What's a good way to nurture lists and add value to people without just coming off as like promoting or just as the guy bugging them about your thing?
Yeah, super good question. So first thing I would do with any old list, find a validation service. I don't get paid by any of these guys, but things like Zero Bounce or Webula, there's a ton of them out there, and pass your data through one of these validation services. Because if you have old data and you don't do that, you run the risk of sending to addresses that can cause you to have major disruptions with your platform. So let's assume, and it doesn't cost you a lot of money, literally hundreds of bucks. So let's assume you validated your list. Now you're good to go. You removed all the bad addresses from that file. What you want to think about in the first really 4 to 5 sends for a database you haven't sent to in a long time is that you are going to promote nothing. That nothing that you're going to send out is going to be a benefit to you, the sender. It's only going to be a benefit to the individual that you are sending to. It's hard to do because our nature is sell, sell, sell and try to get a lead, right? But you have to say, okay, I need to show the people in this database that I'm about to give them value, right? And so you say, here's the new value on your home. You could check this out. And if you want to take them to a website or a page and say, and there's no form to fill out, and tell them that. Say it's ungated. There's nothing you have to do. Or here's a list of 5 new homes that just came on the market. I'm not even trying to sell them, but you should check them out. Or here's a deal that we just saw that's so crazy cool. Or here's an article that just came out that's so interesting. And you're sending them information. You're sending them something of value that's a benefit to them and not to you. Because then what's going to happen in those first few sends, the recipient's going to be like, wait a minute, this sender actually sends me good stuff. And then when you do send them that thing that's promotional, they're going to open it. They're going to give it the time of day. So it's kind of a rewiring of this brain of not just pushing your offers until you've established the fact that you're not annoying.
That's good, man. Yeah, I appreciate that. It like you said, it's not natural.
Right.
It's like, oh, I haven't sent an email in a while. Oh, I got this offer. I need to let everyone know about the offer. But it's like we think about it too late. It's like, I should have warmed them up ahead of time before sending the offer.
It's like dating. You can't just be like, hi, nice to meet you. You want to get married? I mean, it doesn't work,
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, this is good stuff, man. I'm like, my notebook, I'm sitting here like taking notes as you're talking. That's why I keep looking down. So I'm like, okay, do this, do that. So I'm getting value out of this.
Cool.
As we kind of bring it to a wrap, maybe talk to me about like, your favorite copywriting resources. Like how'd you, for me, it was like Ray Edwards was how I came up on copywriting. I think it was How to Write Copy That Sells is the book.
Yeah.
What are your kind of favorite guides?
So there's a couple of creators out there that I follow a lot. One guy's name is Chase Diamond. His last name is Dimond. He's probably the single best email copywriter I know on the planet. So I would check him out, especially on LinkedIn. He shares a ton of stuff. There's another newsletter that just for overall marketing, I think it's the best marketing newsletter on the planet. It's this guy, Daniel Murray. If you go to the marketingmillennials.com, he also has a podcast. He sends out a weekly newsletter about all sorts of things marketing. So those are the 2 guys that I spend a lot of time checking out. And I go deep on podcasts in general. I think that people don't listen to enough podcasts. They may listen to a lot of 1 or 2 or 3 podcasts, but every week I try to listen to 5 new podcasts in my industry, in my category. And the reason I try to do that is, and I think you'll relate to this more than most, the effort that goes into putting out a podcast episode is intense by whoever has that podcast. And being able to hear insights from all these different people putting out podcasts, and not just ones that you like, the most popular ones, but listening to a bunch of new ones every week, I have learned more from that than probably anything else I have done, hands down.
Interesting. That's good. Yeah, I could use that. I could be listening to a few more podcasts, kind of diversify a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff, man. I appreciate that. I'm like, we could nerd out on this stuff all day. At the same time, I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain is exploding. There's so many things to implement. So hopefully you guys have found this helpful. Is there anything else you want to kind of let people know, or anything you feel like people should know about?
If you want, you can check out my free website, subjectline.com. It's 100% free. You can go there, you put your email subject line in. It'll tell you if it's good or bad, and it'll give you other suggestions. You couldn't pay me to use it if you tried. It's totally free. And then, I got a podcast, which you mentioned. I appreciate that. Do This, Not That, for marketers, which is kind of bonkers. And in general, as it relates to email, I'm a big believer that perfection is the enemy of progress. Don't overthink it. Just hit send. If nobody opens it, who cares? Go on to the next one. It's not that big of a deal. That's the beauty of email. It doesn't really cost you a lot of money to send out. So keep on sending, keep on iterating, and you'll be fine.
Nice. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, go use the tool. It's interesting. Check out his podcast. They get into the weeds. For anyone listening, if you're an investor, whether you're a member of Carrot or not, if you don't have automated follow-up in place, if you don't have any follow-up in place, that'd be something to consider. So you can do automated follow-up, drip campaign sequences, whatever you want to call it. You can do that with Carrot CRM, or that's free, or whatever CRM you're using. But get interesting, good quality email follow-up to your leads. And the last thing you want is leads slipping through the cracks just because you didn't have the time or a system set up to educate them to kind of warm up those leads. So get something in place. Last thing, we have a great copywriter. I'll just shout out Paul DeCampo real quick of omnidrip.com. Go to marketplace.carrot.com. We've mentioned him in the past. He's been on the podcast, but he does written for you automated follow-up campaigns. If you want to pay someone to do that for you, he does that for real estate investors. So you can check that out too. But that's all I got for you, Jay. Thanks for hopping on, man. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's super fun. Appreciate everybody.
All right. We'll see you guys on the next episode.